with this, I'm welcoming you to the Global Azure 2023 forum. Thank you very much, Smita, Nandeep, and all the other hosts for accepting my request as a speaker. So I take this opportunity to introduce you, the entire forum, to a wonderful person called Azure Bicep. Okay. So this guy, right? He is like a friendly person, a neighbor, a friendly neighbor who probably nobody would recognize. Okay, unless and until you interact with him. So I interacted with him and I found him very friendly, very easy to use. So I wanted to introduce him to all of you. Okay, so let me quickly share my screen first. Uh, uh, Smita, please tell me once my screen is visible.
Yes, your screen is visible.
Awesome. Okay. So to introduce myself, my name is Arun Ramaswamy, and I am an Azure lead consultant with Evident. I'm based out of Chennai and a multiple times Microsoft certified trainer. So I have around at least I think 8 to 9 certifications in Azure, and I make myself known as an Azure enthusiast, and I also write blogs on my LinkedIn account. So this is the PR code for my LinkedIn account, and you can just scan it and send me a request if you want to know more about the Azure services. So my area of interest is in IaaS, PaaS, database, and cognitive service. Okay. So with this, we'll move on to today's agenda. So as I said, I would be speaking about Azure Bicep today. So which is Microsoft's own infrastructure as code utility, okay, for interacting with Azure and its resources. Okay. So in today's agenda, we'll be talking about what is IaC, what is ARM, which is Azure Resource Manager, and the template it follows or the language it follows, uh, if I may say, and what is Azure Bicep, its benefits, and we'll also have few demo sessions where I'll actually create few Azure Bicep scripts and host it in the Azure environment. And we'll have our QA sessions at the end where you can pose your questions or any clarifications that you have with respect to today's topic. What is IaC? IaC is referred as infrastructure as code. Okay, so when you say infrastructure as code, what do I mean? So any if you talk about any cloud service provider, all the services right that you interact with, you can represent those services in terms of a particular piece of code. Okay, so for any you say any storage service, database service, uh, cognitive service, okay, any service that you interact with, you can represent them in the form of code. And Azure Bicep is one of those tools that helps you interact with the Azure Resource Manager in terms of codes uh, that you can understand. Okay, not necessarily the ARM, but something that you are familiar with, and you can use that to interact with ARM in its own language. So I'll tell you how it works in the subsequent slides. Okay, so that is IaC. Okay, so why would I go for IaC now? See, normally you host or you create or fire up services using. I mean, there are many ways to do it. Right? You have the portal through which you can fire up services. You have CLIs, you have PowerShell scripts, and you can even use your own programmatic languages to fire up services like Python or different SDKs that are available that you can use to fire up services. This bicep is one more, one more type or one more method, way to invoke ARM. Okay. So you can use this bicep scripts to basically automate, infrastructure deployment or any service deployments within the Azure environment. So that is the use of IaC. That was predominantly why IaC came into picture. That you can create a single script and you can use that to automate, or say you can put it in a DevOps environment. So where you can easily automate the deployment of resources, which will probably happen in a few minutes. You don't have to worry about interacting with the portals or nothing like that. So this is secure manner of interacting with ARM. Now, when I speak about ARM or Azure specifically, you will need to know the significance of ARM or Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so Azure Resource Manager was introduced sometime in 2014. Okay, before that they called it as classic deployments. If you had worked in the older environments, you would have come across something called as classic deployments. Okay, so in classic deployments, the way we interact with Azure is completely different to what it is currently in place. Okay, so you did not have something called as resource manager or resource group back then. Okay, so it was all cluttered, right? For each and every service that you want to interact, you don't you do individual deployments. Okay, for example, say I have a document processor, right? A system now which integrates Azure Cognizant Service or Form Recognizer, functions, storages, Cosmos DB. When you have multiple services that interact with each other to create a document processor. Okay, so in classic deployments, I'll have to personally or individually deploy all these services individually. Okay, so I had no way to group them based on their purpose. Okay, I'll have, and to monitor them, I'll have to do it separately. It was a tedious process. So Microsoft came with this Azure Resource Manager that helped, in classifying the services based on their usage. Okay, so I can group them or cluster the services based on their uh, based on the purpose for which it was built. Okay, so I can have a particular resource group under which I'll have different services performing a particular set of tasks. Okay, but it is or how do I say, for an example, I have a finance department that requires few of these services running in the Azure environment. So I can cluster them into a particular resource group and call them finance resource group, something like that. Okay, I'm just giving an example. So you can track these resources and ensure like this ensure these resources are in good health and basically doing what it was meant to do. Okay, so that is the major functionality of an Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so resource ARM is basically the building block of Azure. Okay, without ARM, you cannot even move a single block or a brick within the Azure environment. So any request that you give to fire up resources goes through ARM. So it can be portal, it can be your PowerShell, it can be Bicep, it can be your CLI, whatever. Any input that you give to fire up resources goes through ARM. Okay, so without ARM, there is no Azure. Okay, so that is the significance of ARM. Now, when I talk about ARM, there are few terminologies that you would need to know. Okay, the first thing is you can say these are the hierarchies. Okay, so management group, subscriptions, resource groups, and resources. These are few terms that you would need to know. Management group is nothing but you can use them to combine or monitor if you have more than one subscription in your tenant. Okay, so if you have a root tenant, you will have a subscription. Without subscription, you cannot interact with Azure. So if you have multiple subscriptions, you can use management groups to monitor and interact with these subscriptions. Okay, so subscript when you say management group, the next part is subscription. Subscription is nothing but uh, how you are going to interact with Azure environment, or what level of access do you have. Okay, so it can be free subscription, it can be paid subscription, it can be enterprise subscription. Any type of subscription can be, you can have any of these subscription, but you will need to have some form of subscription to create resources within the uh, Azure environment. Okay, so that's subscription. Resource group is nothing but, under subscription, you always have create a resource group. Okay, to group resources that does a particular task. Okay, for example, I mentioned document processor, right? You can have Azure Cognizant Service, or form recognizer, Cosmos DB, storage, Azure Functions. All these services can be present within a resource group because it is meant to do a document processing. Okay, so with this resource group, you can actually monitor them for billing purposes as well. You can know what resources, or how much resources, or how much, what is the consumption level of each of these resources. All these can be done from a resource group point of view. Okay, so it's easier to maintain your environment when you have resource groups. Okay, and resources is nothing but your individual services that are provided, that are basically available within the Azure environment. It can be database services, it can be AI services, it can be storage services, anything. So all these services are all these services are classified as resources when you talk about ARMs. Okay. So these are the terminologies that you will need to know. Now, if as I said, any interaction with the Azure goes through Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so now what language it speaks? So ARM basically knows only JSON templates. Okay, or it works in terms of JSON format, or JavaScript object notification. Okay, so when you are going to deploy or interact with ARM, it all happens in the form of JavaScript. Okay, so I will actually show you how a JavaScript or a JSON looks like. So it is like a key value pair where you will mention each of the parameter value or parameter names and its corresponding values, using which ARM will create the resources for you. Okay, it's a cumbersome, or it's a lengthy script, uh, which is actually bit more complex. If you are going to deploy multiple resources, the more resources you are going to deploy, the longer it will become. Okay, or it becomes that much more complex to maintain a JSON script. Okay, so why bicep? Now, if you see this slide here, so on the left hand side you have a bicep code, and on the right hand side you have the corresponding JSON code. Okay, so I'm doing nothing but on the left hand side it basically fires up a SQL service. Okay, DB service along with the database, and I'm on the right hand side the corresponding JSON format. Okay, if you look at that, in fact, on the right hand side, if I could not even capture, I mean, it does not even capture the entire screen. So that's how big a JSON script is. So it was difficult for engineers or cloud folks to maintain their resources. The more resources they deployed, it became that much more complex to maintain the JSON script. So Microsoft, to address this issue, came up with something called as Bicep. So Bicep is nothing but your programming language. Okay, so it is more or less like your .NET language, or if you have used VB, it is something like that. It's that easy to understand Bicep, and it's equally easier to code in Bicep and then deploy resources to ARM. Okay, so that is the reason. If you look at the if you had looked at the JSON script, you would probably appreciate why we need to use Bicep. Okay, so now what are the features of Bicep? Okay, so Bicep, it's like a standalone script, just like your shell script, right? You have, or PowerShell script, you have Bicep scripts. Okay, these it basically contains the code to deploy resources in your Azure environment. Okay, so now this script you can actually reuse it somewhere else. So for example, if I have a VNet that I have created using Bicep, I can use the same script to fire up a resource in another tenant. Okay, so I don't really have to create or recreate scripts. I can simply create it once, keep it in an archive, and use that to deploy it in another project or another tenant, or whichever way you want. You can just simply reuse it. Okay, I don't have to manufacture it again. And these are all. Bicep is actually domain specific. So when I say domain specific, it is meant to interact with Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so domain specific language is nothing bad in terms of healthcare, right? So you have a specific way of using health insurance, how what sort of health insurance the patient has, what are the ways to invoke them, what sort of services are available. Okay, so these are all something that is specific to healthcare domain. And in the banking domain, you have something called the process to open an account, a process to avail a loan facility. Okay, these are something that is specific to banking domain. Okay, similarly, whatever resources that I'm going to deploy to Azure, that is specific to the ARM domain. So that is why Bicep is known as domain specific language. It is specifically for meant for AR, interacting with ARMs. Okay, and because it is based on programmatic language, it gives first class authoring experience. So you don't really have to mug up or memorize the format of each and every service. So if you type them, Visual Studio or any of the IDEs is going to give you the format in which you will need to provide the inputs. So you simply have to give the parameters, and it will help you host these resources within Azure. So I'll show you how it works. Okay. Now, why should I use Bicep? Okay, or to be specific, what are the benefits for me? Okay, so I can actually preview. When I say preview, you have something called as what if. I'll actually show you what if command. So using that command, you can know what sort of deployments are going to happen within this environment. Okay, or when I run a specific script, what is going to happen. Okay, so that you can get in preview. Okay, orchestration. When I say orchestration, it's nothing but you can use a single Azure Bicep file to trigger multiple Bicep files. Okay, so you call it you can see it in module functionality, or uh, in the subsequent demo. I'll show you how the orchestration works. Okay, so you have a master file or a main Bicep file which will trigger the subsequent resource files. Okay, and this will ensure that the resources are deployed in sequence without any if there are any dependencies. For example, if you are going to host the VM, you will need something. You will need VNets, you will need network interface cards, you need NSGs, you will need subnets. All these dependencies are there for a VM. Okay, so using this Bicep file, I'm going to orchestrate the deployment of all these dependencies so that my VM is in the proper state that I need that particular VM to be, or I would simply say desired state configuration. Okay, so this orchestration helps me in achieving that. Idempotent is nothing but like how many times I deploy my uh, bicep template, it is going to result in the same output. I'm not going to have any sort of differences. Okay, so even if I make an update to this particular bicep file, it is going to ensure like the updates are made to the specific VM or specific resources. Okay, so the output is consistent. Okay, consistency is the key for idempotent, because otherwise I'm going to lose track of what resources I had basically hosted in my Azure network. So that's idempotent. And because you have first class authorizing experience or authoring experience, the syntaxes are very simple. Okay, I'll show you how easy it is to create resources using Bicep. Okay. Now it is free of cost because it is Azure. It is free of cost, and you have the GitHub libraries as well for Azure. This Azure Bicep. So you can use this library to create a wrapper for yourself as well. So you can create your own custom Bicep application using these libraries. These are all open sources, open sourced, and is free of cost. Okay. Now moving on to the hands-on part. So this is like a theoretical session. So now we'll move on to the hands-on part. So this short URL is the link to my GitHub repository. Okay, so you can take a screenshot of this, and all the demos that I'm going to show here is also present in the Git repository. You can refer to that as well whenever you want to practice with Azure Bicep. Now, the first thing is, for this, I will need, okay, Visual Studio Code. Okay, now, if I want to start coding in Bicep, what are the softwares that I would need? Okay, first thing is you will need Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, okay, or any IDEs of your preference. Okay, because this is based on a programmatic language, you will need a specific IDE. Okay, and to deploy resources or interact with ARM, you will need Azure CLI, and you will need Bicep CLI to convert Bicep programming into the ARM JSON format. Okay, so these are the three softwares that you will you will all need to interact with Bicep. Okay, or host create services in Azure using Bicep. Okay, now coming to the programming part. Okay, now the syntax is very simple. Okay? If I have a parameters, right now, let me start with the resources, because that is what you will be hosting within the Azure environment. So when I say resources, it's nothing but your services. Okay, the syntax is nothing but resources. Okay, now if you just create defaults, right, it will show you what is the format. So this is how simple it is to interact or code in Azure Python. Okay, so now the format is resource identifier, nothing but your symbolic name, you can say, and what type of resource it is. Okay, so here, if you see here, it says resource storage account. I'm creating a storage account here, and this is the provider type. Okay, service provider type. So this you can actually get from your resources as well. Okay, let me quickly show you where you can see. Okay, this is the. Okay, now just quickly click on this vault here. I'll show you. Now click on JSON view, and here you go. And this is nothing but your provider type. here Microsoft keyword. Now Microsoft keyword slash walls is nothing but your service provider for keywords here. Now the description is very simple. If the subscription is nothing but this is my subscription ID. Okay, under subscription ID you will have resource groups, and if you have multiple subscriptions you will have management group here and management group IDs as well. Okay, now because I have only one tenant, it will basically be at subscription level, subscription ID, and you have resource group. My resource group name is global Azure RG, and under that I'm going to use this providers are nothing but resources, and my resource name is keyword here. So this is pretty much the hierarchy that I had showed you in the previous window. Okay, now to run this it is very simple. Let me open a terminal quickly. This terminal. First thing is I will need to log in to my Azure server. Okay, just give AZ login. It will take you to a browser, and you can simply give your username and password, and you will get authenticated into Azure. Okay, so now I'm authenticated. Now the next step is to create a resource group, or I already have a subscription. Okay, so I'm using the subscription. So whatever subscription I have, it basically shows here. Okay, I am having MSDN subscription, so I'm going to use that. Set my subscription. The next one is create a resource group. I already have a resource group created, but this is the command to create a resource group, which is AZ group create. Okay, now let's see this headed. So it will take some time for it to create the resource group, but it's already there. Yeah, and it will return the value. So this is what I meant by item portal. Okay, this global Azure resource group, if you had noticed it, it is already there here. Okay, so it's already there. So if I actually give this value, it is not going to create any problem saying it is already there, or it's not going to say any sort of duplicate error message. Okay, it's simply going to check if this is present. If this is present, it is going to return me the ID. Okay, if not, it is going to create the resource for me. This is called as item portal. No matter how many times I run it, it is going to give me the same output. Okay, so I can change the location as well to a different region, and it is going to again show me the same global Azure resource group with a different location. Okay, so that's item important. Now I'm going to set this as default. Set this resource group as default for all the demo that I'm going to show today. So I'm default using AZ configure defaults. Okay. Now to run a template. Okay. The command that you use is AZ deployment group create hyphen file, and you give the bicep. Okay. Now here the bicep name is storage.bicep. Okay, so that's the name here. Let's see. Let's just quickly run this now. Now once you run, what is going to happen at the background? Now, okay, I think I'll need to move to the path here. Now, if I run this in the background, this bicep CLI is going to convert this bicep file into a JSON file. Okay, because ARM template only recognizes JSON format. So my bicep file is going to convert my bicep CLI is going to convert bicep file into an ARM JSON format, and this AZ or Azure CLI is going to use that JSON format to invoke Azure ARM, okay, or resource manager. So that resource manager is going to use this JSON template to see all the parameters, look at the resource type that is that is being requested, and it is going to invoke that particular service provider to create an instance of that resource. Okay, so this is the steps that is happening at the background. So if once I have deployed it, it will actually show us running here. Okay, so once it is created, it is this terminal is going to give me the are going to output a message saying succeeded along with the resource that has been created. Okay, so if you see here, the storage has been created, it is in success state, and it is in incremental. If this is actually important. Okay, when you say incremental, it is nothing but uh, so this is part of a source control. Okay, so every time you run this command, it is going to increment. Okay, so to know what or which service or which build deployed which service. Okay, so that is going to be noted as incremental, and the resource group is global Azure RC. Okay, so let's quickly go to okay, I'm already here in this resource group. Let's just go. And if you see here, you have the storage account created. Now, I go to this storage account. I click on this JSON here. I can nowhere in this portal I can see the bicep format because ARM does not understand bicep format. Okay, so the bicep code here is probably what 11 lines of code, and if you see here, it is actually 55 lines of code. Okay, so this is 1:5. So that is how easy it is to code with Azure Bicep. Okay, so it's convenient, it's easy, it's fast, it's simple. Okay, so anyone can learn Bicep within a few hours, in fact. Okay, so that's how easy it is to work with Azure Bicep. Now, the second part is all these are hard coded. Okay, I don't want these hard coded ones, so I want to give it in terms of parameters. Okay, so this is the syntax to give parameter. So you say parameter. Okay. Now simple parameters default. So it will say again ask you what type of identifier or parameter is. You can just give your own values here and type here. So when you say type, you will have different types of parameters. For example, uh, STG name. Okay. Click on space. These are the types of parameters that Azure Bicep supports. It can be Azure, it can be bool, it can be integer, it can be object type. Object type is actually used when you are going to output what sort of services has been created. Okay, so when you want to initialize or instantiate a particular service, you use this object type, and then string. Okay, so these are the different types of parameters that are supported. So you simply give all these values here. Okay, and then you run the service. Okay, you follow the same format. Okay, now what is difference between parameter and variable? Okay, parameter is nothing but the values that you pass on to the resources or services. Okay, variable is any constant value that you are going to use or generate within this bicep code. Okay, so you use variable when you want to have a constant, and you use parameter when it is changed or when it is updated, or you're going to change it during runtime, or it's going to get different values at different point in time. Okay, so that is how you use parameters and variables here. Okay, so I'll again go to the correct path here, or otherwise I'll again get the same error message. Now this is storage parameter. Not bicep. Yeah, that's the one name. Okay. Now let's just run and see what happens. Now here, please provide string value for demo string. Okay. Uh,
Arun, I'm able to see your
sorry.
presentation only.
Okay,
Yeah.
one moment. Sorry. Apologies. Let me retry. Okay, I'll share it again. I'll share my entire screen so that you. Yeah, you're able to see now. Sorry, Smita. My apologies.
No, it's
You're
okay.
able to
Okay.
see now.
Yeah. Now it's
Yeah.
visible. Yes.
Okay. So this is what I was talking about. Param, right? So param. So this will be the default, param syntax. Okay, so you are going to specify the param name and the type here. Okay. Wait. Okay. Run this storage. Okay, so as I said, where you use for constants, param is used for runtime values that you are going to pass to the services or resources within Bicep. Okay, so now our template is running. uh, so it is being created or converted into JSON format, and then once it does, we'll get a success message. Let's just wait for it to complete. Okay, so here I'm using the storage prefix, right? So storage prefix, I've given it as dev, and I'm giving storage name as retail stj. I'm just, this command here is going to concatenate both this dev and retail storage here, retail storage for me, and will give me a resource with name dev retail stj. Okay, so let's just wait for the run to complete. Okay, so now it's succeeded. So it has given, it has created a storage. I mean, this name, it's the name of the file that we ran, which is storage parameter. State is succeeded. Everything is done. Let's quickly go to our global Azure resource group, and yeah, and if you see, the dev retail storage has been created for us. Okay, so I'm just deleting it since I don't need it anymore. Okay. Done. Okay. Going to my, because I'm running out of time. I don't want to keep you guys waiting. So please visit this GitHub URL. Okay. So I have created file here. Okay. So it would give you step-by-step instruction how you can run the uh, bicep scripts here. Okay, so please do visit this, give it a visit, and you can follow these, please follow these steps. So I've made it as easy as possible for you to understand how to create the bicep scripts here. Okay, so now using these concepts here, right? I'll probably show you this modules here, because this one is important. This is what, this is how you can achieve modularity or say orchestration. Okay, so I have this file here. Okay, so this file is going to create a service plan for me. Okay, it's going form and a Microsoft static website. Okay, service plan ID. It's going to give me a app service app for me. Okay, so this module is for app service app. Okay, this module I am creating a storage here. Okay, so I provided all these parameters here. So if I want to create these two resources, I'll have to probably run them separately. Okay, but instead of that, what I'm doing is I'm creating this param.bicep file. Okay, where I am calling these two modules. Okay, storage modules here, and the app module here. Okay, so I'm going to call these two modules from my param module so that all these services are done sequentially. Okay, I don't have to wait for or I don't have to individually run each and every script file. So for example, if I have a VM, I don't really have to run VNets or NICs, all these separate dependencies, right? You'll have multiple dependencies. So I don't have to run the script for all those dependencies individually. Rather, I create a module file and call this module file, which will in turn help me run the other scripts, bicep script. If the not bicep, okay? Let's just run and see what happens. So what I'm achieving here is I'm passing all these value over runtime. Okay, so I'm not giving any of these values to the other resources. I'm providing the value here and I'm passing it over runtime. Okay, so here if you see, I've not provided any of these values. I've just declared it. Okay, so all the values are obtained from this particular param file. So it makes declaring or deploying multiple resources this much that much easier. Okay, I can use this same template in another project basically, or you can use this for DevOps purpose as well, which in itself is a is a separate session which I intend to take in this group. So please watch out for that as well for a DevOps session. Okay. Now our param file is running. Just give it a couple of minutes for it to complete. So using these concepts, I have created. Okay, it's a succeeded. Go to the Azure tool, refresh it. Let's see what it has given me. Okay, cool. It has given me this global Azure storage group. It has given me this app service plan, and it has also hosted this particular app services within this app service plan. So I was able to trigger two different resources using a single file or orchestrate. If I want to speak in terms of Bicep, okay, I have orchestrated the deployment of two different resources using a single master file. Okay, so using this concept, I've just I wanted to actually show you VNet to VNet peering, but due to lack of time, I'm just showing how to basic how to create a survey SQL server, okay, or fire up an SQL server using the bicep code. Okay, but here I'm not going to pass the parameters or at least the password parameters. I'm going to use the password from key vault. Okay, I've already created, I mean, I have a key vault in my resource group. I'm going to use the keys or secrets that is stored within that key vault to retrieve the secrets for logging into my user or logging into my SQL server. Okay, to do that, all you have to do is create or use these resources. Okay, create resources, create a key vault, all these yada yada yada, and use this existing keyword. Existing keyword is nothing but I'm going to use the existing key vault present in my resource group. I'm going to fetch the properties into this KV, okay, and then use this value to populate the values here. Okay, now I'm using those values to this SQL DB bicep, and if you see here, I'm actually giving the password here. Okay, username, and the password I am retrieving it from key vault. Okay, the existing key vault, I'm using get secret method to get the value of that particular password for this admin ID. Okay, let's quickly run this and see. The name is SQL param. Okay. Folder. If I run this, all the parameters are going to be passed to this particular SQLDB dot bicep file. Okay. So I'm doing this, if I'm doing all these activity during runtime. I'm already having this KV hosted in my Azure environment. I'm using that the secret stored within that to create a SQL service for me. So I mean, it's running. Probably give it a couple of minutes for it to complete. Okay, in the meanwhile, I'll probably take any questions or clarifications that any of you have with this session, with respect to this session or any other IAS or PAS service. So, Smita, I'll just open the forum for QA, Smita. Yeah. I think I'm done with my
Yeah, sure, sure.
yeah, I'm done with my session here. So please do visit my GitHub if you are real. I mean, if you really want to work out on that. I've given step-by-step instruction on how to create the Azure Bicep resource or Bicep script, and how you fire up those scripts. Or what are the dependency softwares that you need to install, how to get the extensions done. All these steps I've given in that repository. So please do have a look at it, and get to know about Bicep, because I don't see. I mean, it's such an easy or friendly service that you can use to host your service. Okay, so please do have a look at it, practice it. I think within one day you will be accustomed or acquainted with this particular service. Okay. So thank you, Smita. Thanks for this opportunity. So
Yeah,
I'll
thank
throw
you.
the
Thank you, Arun.
yeah. So it's still running. So
Yeah,
any
it's
query